Hello, everyone, and welcome to Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and today we're going to hope, wish, and pray that we get a worthy adaptation of a DC Comics superhero that has been gracing the comic books ever since 1959, and that's Supergirl. And we have a Supergirl movie coming to us from DC Studios and Warner Brothers Pictures on June the 26th, entitled Supergirl. And that film is starring Millie Alcock as Kara Zor-El, or Supergirl. Millie, you may know her if you are a House of the Dragon fan. She was on that first season, couple of appearances in the second, but she's taken over this role of a character that, aside from a couple of animated appearances, and I will go as far to say the television show that was on the CW, which was pretty good until it wasn't, and those adaptations were decent, haven't had a proper adaptation on the big screen. But we did get one back in 1984, and it was Supergirl, and it starred Helen Slater. And that movie, I think I was 5, 6 years old when I saw it, and I was so excited to see another superhero on the big screen. Up to that point, the only superhero movie I've seen was Superman. That was it. And Superman 2. And then, God help us, we got Superman 3. But that was it. We didn't have any MCUs, DCUs, CW, Arrowverse shows, and all this other good stuff. All we had was that. And, it was, once again, good until it wasn't. And you needed something different. And in 1984, we got Supergirl. But we were not going to review it right now. We're going to wait a few minutes to review it. But I wanted to give a little history first of Supergirl and give a little backstory of Supergirl in case those of you who are not nerds or geeks like myself, it may be you didn't follow this character in the comics. You didn't watch the 1984 film, or you didn't watch this character on the Justice League Unlimited or the CW show. That was pretty good. I think out of all the CW shows in the Arrowverse, that was one of the better ones. Until it kind of played itself out, like all of those shows, unfortunately. But let's go over a brief history of Supergirl, and then we're gonna have our retro review of the 1984 superhero film starring Helen Slater as Supergirl. And so we got to go back to May of 1959. That was the first appearance in Action Comics number 252 when we got introduced to the character of Supergirl, who is the cousin of Superman. And the whole concept was created as a female counterpart to Superman. Kara Zor-El, she shared his powers. She was basically a carbon copy of Superman. She was vulnerable to kryptonite. She had superhuman strength. She could fly. Everything that Clark can do, she can do. And Supergirl, she played a supporting role in various DC comics back in the day, which included Action Comics, Superman comics, of course, and several other comic book series unrelated to Superman. But in 1969, there was a turn of the tides, if you will. Supergirl's adventures became the lead feature in Adventure Comics, and she later starred in her own comic book series, which debuted back in 1972. And that ran until 1974, followed by a second monthly comic book series, The Darling New Adventures of Supergirl, which ran from 1982 to 1984. Supergirl was originally introduced in Action Comics as the cousin of the flagship superhero Superman in the story Supergirl from Krypton. In most depictions in the comics, now a lot of people don't realize that depending on what era you were reading comic books, her backstory changes. You know, her origin is different, and that's a lot of superheroes in comic books. It'll drive you crazy if you're a comic book lover. You know, sometimes they'll change the canon and change the origins and change the power sets and all this other stuff of superheroes, and you're like, okay, where are we in an alternate universe or something? But in most depictions, she is an alien from the planet Krypton, possessing a multitude of superhuman abilities derived from the rays of the yellow sun, just like her dear old cousin Clark. But I think the most monumental moment in Supergirl's history wasn't when she saved a cat out of a tree or saved the universe or helped Clark save the universe or the rest of the Justice League. No, it was an event that took place in 1985, and it was called Crisis on Infinite Earths. This was a huge event in comic books at that time, and DC editors, they decided to kill Supergirl, and that kicked off the Crisis on Infinite Earths. You can search and Google the cover art of that, and it's Superman holding dead body of Kara Zor-El. And I think the rumor is, now I haven't heard any confirmation, I didn't read it anywhere, but a lot of people feel the same way. The reason that Supergirl was killed off in 1985 in that comic book run was because of that 1984 film. I think the movie was so bad that they decided to just kill that character altogether in all medias. And so, but it birthed a new age of comic books, you know, because Crisis on Infinite Earths is one of the most monumental events in all of comics, whether it was DC or Marvel. But I digress. Let's get into the bio of Supergirl, or Kara Zor-El, who is the last survivor of Argo City, which had survived the explosion of the planet Krypton and had drifted through space. The city had been covered in this plastic dome for weather moderation. It wasn't there to protect them from an explosion. It just so happened to happen, you know, and it was created by Zor-El, who is the younger brother of Jor-El, the father of Superman, or Kal-El. So this dome, it held a large chunk of landmass under the city, and it drifted through space in the general direction of the solar system. And so the land was converted into green kryptonite, which is covered with lead. And we all know that lead is a weakness to Superman and Supergirl. He can't see through lead and can't penetrate it. That I don't know why lead, but hey, it is what it is. It's comic books. But the lead cover was destroyed by a meteor strike, and it forced Kara to be sent to Earth. And so on Earth, Kara, she gained her powers, which was identical to Superman. And she adapted this secret identity of Linda Lee, who is a resident of an orphanage. I forgot the name of the orphanage, but she had concealed her blonde hair. She had just blonde hair, and she had hid it under a brunette wig, and she her features as Supergirl, she hid that as well, of course. And this was at the request of Superman, because she would have had no problem just being Kara Zor-El on Earth, but Clark had to break it down to her, like, whoa, they don't rock like that here. they don't do that here. You got to keep your identity a secret. And so later on down the line, she did join the ranks of her cousin, her famous cousin, and became a superhero. And she fought alongside him on many, many battles, and several of her own, but none were more poignant than the aforementioned 12-part epic limited series, Crisis on Infinite Earth. Now, this ran from April of 85 to March of 86. And it not just Supergirl, but it was many deaths. Flash was a huge death in that 12-issue run as well, but she's the one that really kicked it all off. And she did it. She sacrificed herself to save Superman and the multiverse. And so it wasn't like a meaningless death. It was pretty poignant. And so when the Superman continuity was rebooted after Crisis on Infinite Earth, DC editors, they felt that Superman should be the sole survivor of Krypton, resulting in Kara being removed. And so, unlike a number of other characters that had died in Crisis on Infinite Earth, no one remembered Kara dying or even existing after that event. And so it was heartbreaking to, when you have a character that made the ultimate sacrifice to save the universe, the multiverse, and nobody remembers you. Nobody even knows what you did, and it was heartbreaking, soul crushing even. But like every other comic book character ever to die in the pages of comics, they always find a way back. They had Infinite Crisis, another event that took place after the Crisis on Infinite Earth. It actually served as the sequel to that comic run, and many historical events from the multiverse were being remembered. And Diana Troy, who is Wonder Girl in the comics, she died in Crisis as well, but she came back. She came back, but when she came back, she actually remembered Kara Zor-El. And not only remembered her, but she remembered the sacrifice that she made. And so in doing that, I forgot how that all ended, but that was her way back into the comic books. And so I think they course corrected after. I think a lot of people complained. I don't recall. Of course, there was no internet around that time, but there was some pretty upset people about that character dying off. So they quickly brought her back in Infinite Crisis. But since then, Supergirl has been a part of the Legion of Superheroes. She got new powers. She can manifest sunstone crystals from her body, and she can but I think in the comics she can only do that when she's stressed out. So that's the only time she can do it. But anyways, that's a brief little breakdown of Supergirl in the comics and her history, how she came to be, and how important of a character that was in the comic books. Now moving on to the other adaptations of this character, Supergirl has appeared on numerous forms of media, whether it's animation and Superman, the animated series, or DC Superhero Girls, the 4th season of Harley Quinn that's on HBO Max, the New Adventures of Superman. She appears on that show. Really good show if you haven't watched that animated series. Awesome show. Also on television in live action form back in 2006, 2007 on Smallville. Kara was introduced to the cast. Laura Vandervoot, I think her name is. Beautiful woman. She was awesome as Kara Zor-El. She was on there. Of course, we know about the Supergirl television show, which initially premiered on CBS back in 2015, but switched over to the CW to be a part of the Arrowverse a couple of years later. And then she had a brief, and I mean brief, cameo in the latest season of Peacemaker in a silhouetted little cameo to kind of retcon the first season of Peacemaker. And so they just stuck her in there along with Superman, Hulk Girl, and a couple of other characters from the Superman film that came out last year. But let's move over to film. In film, Supergirl has went through a lot to try to make it to the big screen, and only succeeding twice. One we haven't even gotten to yet at the time of this recording, but before she broke through in 1984, Supergirl was actually going to be a part of the third installment of the Superman film franchise, Superman 3, before they got Richard Pryor, and that I don't know what that villain was, but before that came to be, which they felt was a better idea than the one they initially pitched, or the producers initially pitched for the third Superman film. It was going to star Christopher Reeves, of course, and it was going to be larger in scale, more cosmic in scale. And the villains of that film would have been Brainiac and Mr. Maplicolis. I could never say his name right. The little one, you got to say his name or whatever. But it was also going to feature Supergirl. And the original outline featured a father and daughter relationship between Brainiac and Supergirl, and a romance between Superman and Supergirl, although the two were cousins in the comics. And so that was immediately thrown out by Warner Brothers. They were like, nah, call Richard Pryor, let's get him in and make that movie. We're not doing that. And so it was still a long, rocky road until you got to 1984, and we're going to go over that when we go over that. But skipping that, in August of 2018, they were developing a film around Supergirl. It was announced they had got a writer. They hired a director. You may know her name, Reed Moreno. She directed a few episodes of The Handmaid's Tale, and a well-known cinematographer in Hollywood. So she was hired on to direct the film, and it fell apart. It was set to go in production in early 2020, and we know what happened in early 2020. So that didn't come to be. And so in February of 2021, Andy Muschietti, he was directing The Flash, and he needed a Supergirl. They wanted to put Supergirl in that film, and Sasha Calle was cast as Supergirl and to play Kara Zor-El. And that version of the character, I will say that, you say what you will about the movie, and I'm not going to argue at all about that movie, but I liked Sasha Calle's portrayal of Supergirl. It fit the tone of that version of the DC universe. You know, we were still in the Henry Cavill, Ben Affleck, Jason Momoa as Aquaman universe. So you needed to have that tone of a character. You couldn't have the bubbly character, and Sasha Calle brought that hard edge to that character, and I actually enjoyed it. I was excited to see her in the role. I hoped that she would get a chance to, lead her on film as the character, but didn't come to be, because in 2024, once James Gunn took over at DC Studios, he rebooted the entire universe, recast everybody, mostly, and we got a new Supergirl. He announced that they hired Millie Alcock to portray Kara Zor-El, or Supergirl, in a new film that will be released on the 26th of June. So it'll be right around the corner, and it's going to be based on Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, that comic book miniseries that ran from 2021 to 2022. I just finished it. I had promised myself that I was going to read it before the movie came out, and I'm so proud of myself. because I never finish anything. And I finally finished that. At least I never finished anything on the deadline that I set for myself, and I did it this time. And so, really good comic, awesome comic book run, I should say. The movie, I could already tell, the movie is very loosely based. It is not a beat by beat adaptation of Woman of Tomorrow, but it is. It has some of the crust in there. Some of the meat on that bone is in this upcoming film. But enough about that. Enough about the history. Enough about where she came from, who she with, all this other foolishness. Let's jump into what we all came here for, and that is the 1984 groundbreaking, monumental, spectacular, the superhero film Supergirl. This film is set after the events of Superman 3, which came out the year prior in no pun intended, in 1983, and it stars Helen Slater as Supergirl, Faye Dunaway, Peter Cook, Mia Farrow is in this thing. Peter O'Toole is in this thing. Marc McClure, who reprises the role of Jimmy Olsen. The only connection to the Superman movies, he appears in this film as well. This is DC's first attempt at a cinematic universe. Marvel wasn't the first to do it, sadly. It was DC. Unfortunately, it was bad movies. Bad movies that were a part of this universe. This has to be one of the worst movies, let alone comic book movies, but one of the worst movies you ever want to watch. This movie makes absolutely zero sense. You have no idea. You have no idea. And look, I rewatched it for this show, and I'm just as lost. I wasted an hour and a half of my life that I can't get back watching this movie because it was no point. I remember everything from when I watched it back in the 80s. Nothing changed. I have the same things I forgot from watching it all the way back then. I forgot already from watching it 2 days ago. This movie is the most forgettable movie ever, man. It's nothing to grab you. Only a couple of scenes. And I mean a couple. One is because Popeyes is in it. And I don't know why that's seared in my brain. It's seared in my brain that Popeyes was heavily featured in this movie. I get it. They were a financial backer of the movie, product placement. I get it, but my God, Popeyes? It was weird to me because, I always thought when I was younger, at least around that time, I thought that Popeyes was just relegated to New Orleans. I don't know why, but that was in my head. I felt that's what it was. And once that movie came out, I felt, oh, that's why Popeyes got famous. But no, Popeyes was always famous. But anyways, the special effects in this movie. I understand it was 1984. I know Industrial Light Magic and all these other effects houses probably didn't exist back then. Or, it wasn't a thing. CG wasn't a thing. Visual effects wasn't a thing. It was used sparingly. And then when it was used in certain films, it was used to kind of hide things or fully lean into the cheese, fully embrace the absurdity of it all, But this was a movie, for one reason or another, it thought it was a serious film. But the actors didn't think that. With the exception of Helen Slater, who was perfectly cast. She beat out a lot of young actresses around that time. Demi Moore, I should say. Demi Moore, she was cast in the film, but not as Kara. She was cast as Lucy Lane, but she dropped out right before production to do another film. I can't remember the name of the film off the top of my head. But yeah, she was really, really good as Supergirl. I believed her as Kara. I believed her as Linda Lee. I believed that she could fly. she was good as the character. Didn't hate that. Christopher Reeves was supposed to have a cameo in here as Superman, but he bowed out. He said thanks, but no thanks. I've already been in one bad superhero movie. I'm done. I'm not doing another one. And he wasn't going to come back as Superman at all, unless they backed up the truck to him, and that's what they did for Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. And I don't know. I hope that money was worth it. But yeah, aside from Helen Slater, everybody else understood the assignment. They was there to get a check. Faye Dunaway, I don't know what she was doing in this movie. I have no earthly idea what her character was. They told us she was the villain. They told us that she was this just grand sorceress, which she wasn't. She just happened upon the Omegahedron. That's what they called the thing. And I don't get it. I just don't get her character at all. Peter O'Toole, who was an accomplice act. I really believe he was drunk the entire movie. That's how he acted. That was the character. He was acted drunk the entire movie, just goofy and silly and out of place. It was like he was in a completely different movie. And then we get into this confrontation at the end when she's fighting this shadow demon, and this where the visual effects just went bananas. Now her flying scenes were great. I actually enjoyed her flying scenes. It was in comparisons to the Superman films around that time, which still holds up. Him flying, those are some awesome scenes. Love those scenes, and she had some really good flying scenes as well. But my God, this shadow demon thing, it was just ridiculous. The whole thing was ridiculous. The whole plot, or lack thereof, was ridiculous. I mean, think about it. The whole MacGuffin of the movie is this Omegahedron, right? And she has to retrieve it to return it to her home, to Argo City. Otherwise, they were going to die. But once she gets to Earth, because she was sent there just to retrieve this thing. And so she gets to Earth, and you forget. you completely forget for like 45 minutes of the movie. Like, that's the reason she's there, because she's there just living it up, being Supergirl, falling in love and all this other stuff, while the people in her city, including her parents, dying because they don't have this device. And so that takes a back seat. The subplots, she's at this all-girls school and all this here, that dominated the entire movie. And I'm like, where it went? What happened? The tone was all over the place. It struggled between being comic book, keeping with the comic book mythology, and then at the same time, you got love potions and witches, and it was just disjointed all over the place. Now, I want to preface this. I should have said this earlier, but the comic book movies that came out around that time, which was very sparing, didn't take it serious like you do now. You don't have Black Panthers getting nominated for Best Pictures and stuff like that. They didn't take movies serious like that. The Avengers Endgame and Batman v Supermans, or just serious comic book where a lot of thought, care, and passion goes into them. You didn't have that then. And so you kind of got to take the good with the bad, but this was just so bad. There was no passion other than the fact that she could fly. That was the whole thing. She could fly. And the fact that they couldn't fork up some money and get Christopher Reeves in there for one day of shooting, is a crime against nature. To kind of solidify this movie, give it a little gravitas. It was a major misfire by the producers of this film. But it wasn't all bad, funny enough. It wasn't all bad. Like I said, Helen Slater, and this was a film debut. This is before The Legend of Billie Jean and films like that. This was her first film, and she captured everybody there. I mean, she mirrored Christopher Reeve's approach to Superman, I feel. This fish out of water story, her earnestness, her sincerity, her trying to fit in, and it was all there, and she captured that perfectly. When she needed to be powerful, she was powerful. When she needed to be timid, she was timid. She understood the assignment, and she really did a phenomenal job as Kara Zor-El, aka Supergirl, in this film. Jerry Goldsmith's score. The score is epic. I mean, it's a beautiful score. The romantic themes are spectacular. He was able to incorporate some of John Williams' original Superman score up in there as well. It's a score that doesn't deserve to be with this movie. The movie doesn't live up to the score, and that's sad to say. And now, I know I poo-pooed on Faye Dunaway, but she was fun in the movie. She was so over the top, so campy, and she chewed up every scene she was in, and I believe it was on purpose. It had to be on purpose. She was just living it up, and she didn't care. She did not put in this mustache trolling. Well, she's female, but your typical comic book villain. This was an over the top witch who just wanted world domination, and for reasons we don't know, because it was never established. But that's not Faye Dunaway's fault. I think it's the filmmakers' fault, screenwriters and whatnot, who did not develop this character at all. But it was fun watching her in the role. Overall, it's a charming movie. It's deeply flawed, and I don't know if it's at cult status. You don't hear nobody talk about Supergirl being a cult classic, but it is a charming little movie. Nostalgic wise, you can look back if you love 80s cheese, because there's no cheese like 80s cheese. This is a perfect little throwback film for you. The jump cuts, the plot holes, that it's all there for you. It's a nostalgia showcase because it is truly dated as all get out. When you pop this in, this is 1984. It is there's no debating like, man, this came out in the 90s or the late 80s, or no, it came out in 1984. It feels like 1984 through and through. But believe it or not, there's actually a director's cut of this movie that a lot of chatter online says that it fixed some of the problems, some of the pacing issues. Argo City is flushed out a little bit more. You go deeper into that. It gives a little more story behind Selena, the witch, Faye Dunaway's character. I've never seen it. Don't care to see it. But there's supposed to be a ultimate edition of this movie somewhere that dives deeper into the story. But I don't think it helped. It is nothing that could help this movie. I don't care who cut it and who put some deleted scenes in here or whatever. At the end of the day, Supergirl from 1984 is a nostalgia trip. It is a cheesy 80s superhero film that is good to put on, if anything, just to sit there and laugh for an hour and a half. I give Supergirl from 1984 a letter grade of a D+. Yeah, it's not the worst comic book movie I ever seen, but it's definitely one of them. It's oh man, what can I give the worst? Batman and Robin is still the one of the worst movies I ever saw. I can't. I'm sorry, I can't excuse that movie. that movie cut deep. But so it's something. It's something to behold, and I don't think Supergirl is that bad, but it's bad. It's just not that bad. But that's my humble opinion. I would like to know, what did you think of Supergirl from 1984? Do you remember watching this movie? Do you even know this movie exists? Because 1984 was a long time ago. Unfortunately, unfortunately, I remember going in the theater and see it. So that just lets you know that I am old. But it is hard to find this movie. At least it was for me. But I want to know, do you remember it? Did you ever enjoy it? Or are you looking forward to this new adaptation of Supergirl that stars Millie Alcock and is directed by Craig Gillespie, who's a really good director? I'm excited for that movie. I really am. But I want to know from you. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also search for the show on all social media platforms. Just search for the KB Radio Network. Also, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget about YouTube. Subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel and like this video if you don't mind. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to Movie Goodness here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this retro review of Supergirl 1984. I wonder if anybody here, if you're still here, probably clicked on it. You saw Supergirl in review in the same statement and you thought it was the new one. Did you get shamed, or are you mad at me right now? Read the thing. Read the whole thing. Supergirl from 1984. It's the retro review. We'll have that Supergirl from 2026. That review will be up as soon as that movie comes out on the 26th. I want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love everyone. And until we speak again, you all be blessed.